or you could follow along with one of the live streams as well. So yeah, let me just zoom out here a bit. How have you been doing, Dan? How are things?
Good, good. Had a very productive Sunday.
Oh, nice. That's unusual for me. Usually my Sundays are. This is the peak of my productivity on Sunday. After it goes downhill from here. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably go hang out at the park later today or go for a hike or something. That's usually how my Sundays
Nice.
go. Yeah. Okay, so we got our Miro board open here. I guess our old business is kind of business we talked about before, but today we'll be talking about proxy voting, and we'll be fairly objective about the whole thing. I know there's been some animosity, I guess, towards the vault, but we don't want to scapegoat the vault. We don't want to scapegoat specific members. We want to look at the issue objectively and actually try to address the core kind of issues that people have, and as a result we could hopefully remedy like a lot of the concerns that people have. So we'll be talking about that. I imagine that's going to take up a lot of our time today, but if we still have time left, I know there is a conversation around alchemica, dust alchemica, and also the conversation around eyes. So I'm not sure if we'll get to those today, but if we do, we can. It'll be a nice way to end off. So, um, yeah. So with proxy voting, it kind of starts off with a post that Mikey J put down in forum, uh, referring to proxy voting and his take on how his opinion on proxy voting. We also have members of the Vault, Coder Dan, Bearded, who put their they've given their insights from their end, and we can kind of take all that into account and see if we can figure out some solutions. Um,
Just to clarify, I'm not a member of the vault.
yes, and Coder Dan is not a member of the Vault. Uh,
Yeah, no conflict of interest there.
yeah. Um, Also, we should remember we're in the cocoon phase of the DAO. So, at this point in the DAO, our functions as a DAO are mainly around governance. But the DAO grows in phases. This is the second phase, and so the features we deal with here as a DAO. You can do contract calls by Pixelcraft. There's no contract upgrades. This is all based on like previous literature, so it might not be 100% accurate, but for the most part, it's still, like the Ghost token is based on governance. Um, a platform is of course Snapshot, and we get XP for votes, and we're on Polygon. That's kind of the framework of Cocoon right now. Metamorphosis, as a DAO, we will be able to execute smart contract calls. And if you look at some of the calls, they're pretty high level, right? They're like, create a haunt, I think was one of them. There's a few like high level functions that the DAO would maybe have more influence over. Certain upgrade mechanics, the DApp front end, yeah, and then XP and badges for voting. It's another kind of layer to the DAO. And I guess in Metamorphosis, we could include sub DAOs and district DAOs in that phase as well, probably, right? Or is that going to come before then? Um,
We weren't really envisioning like district DAOs at this point. Really, the main focus of Metamorphosis is to have on-chain smart contract calls, where we're more like the Aave protocol, where they actually have like full on-chain governance, and we don't have like Pixelcraft executing things. Anything that could be executed on chain would be executed on chain at that point.
Interesting, yeah. And so I think it's important to have this discussion, because of in preparation for something like that. So we at least are on all standing on common ground that the voting is in fact being done fairly and is actually representative of the people participating in the votes. And so yeah, there's a whole bunch of functions there. So let's see. I'm gonna start off with Mikey J's post here, and I'll plug the post in actually here, so you guys can follow along if you want. Here you go. So that's his concerns about custodial asset management and proxy voting. And so, as a lot of us think the vault is, a pretty cool product, pretty innovative product in our ecosystem. They put a lot of effort into making sure that on their end it's offering the most value for people that are using the vault. So that should be said first. And then I guess he goes right into talks about the trade-offs of custodying assets, and specifically looking at just the VLT token. And it was for those that don't know, it's a token that was distributed completely through participation over 6 months. And so I know I have some VLT. I had some Gotchi staked in the vault for a while, so I was earning VLT. And so I'm sure a lot of other people were earning VLT as well. It's the VLT token holders have to vote on a proposal before the vault gets to vote on it, from my understanding. And so they're going to look at that, get their votes in, and then based on that, that's what allows the votes to be executed. I guess some of the problems start with, parties that don't necessarily participate in VLT governance, but their voting power is still exercised through the vault. And so the holders who do vote have kind of a disproportionate say in a way over Aavegotchi DAO relative to the assets that they're using. That's kind of what he goes into with this post. And so kind of not addressing all the VLT holders, just the ones that maybe are not participating, but their assets are still being represented in that voting power, is part of it. And so he finishes off that post with, the net effect of this is the vault's voting power is transferred from a majority share of passive asset owners to a minority of VLT holders who actively participate in the governance. So as a result, it actually takes a smaller number of VLT holders to sway the majority of the VLT vote, and in turn wield the near majority for Aavegotchi DAO because they have so much voting power. And so it's only a few individuals. He has a chart. There that kind of shows the number of voters that voted on each proposal with VLT, and the minimum amount of voters that were used that would create a change. And so I guess that's part of it. But in a general sense, the vault's intentions, I don't think there's ill intent. I don't think there's any malicious intent. But we have to remember that if these sorts of governance systems exist with another token, this could happen potentially with maybe another organization that decides to do something similar, but maybe their intentions might not be, in the best interest. And I guess my question would be, how much voting power should any one block be able to submit? Like, should one voting block be allowed to submit 30% of the voting power, 40% of the voting power? At some point, it's kind of like, we have to make sure that we don't have a handful of people always pushing through a majority. But I will say that one of the other sides, on the vault side of things, is that they do believe, that the people that have, abdicated their voting power to the vault are, the way I guess, Dr. Wagme had put it, is the vault holders, some of them are putting their assets in there without the intention of really caring for the voting power, and so they're not really voting with their VLT. They're using the vault as a custodial asset manager, and then you have other people going into the vault, not only using it as a custodial asset manager, but also voting with VLT. Now, this is not all the VLT holders, and I think that's kind of where the problem is with having a smaller amount of people being able to sway a vote. But still, all the assets are being represented. On the vault side of things, like I said, they believe they're kind of because they're not acting with ill intent, and they do try their best to vote at the end, or in their best way try and vote to to not skew things before the actual outcome has been almost determined. Um, and I'm trying to remember a conversation I had with him last night. The way he put it was kind of like they are essentially like guarding, I guess, that voting power in a way. Like you could have a malicious party coming in and trying to do the same thing, but if you have the vault with a large amount of voting power, in a sense, I don't know. I guess in a sense it shows that they're. Yeah, I don't really remember the conversation offhand, to be honest. But Dr. Wagme had a post, where he says, for the most part, they got positive feedback from their holders. VLT was fairly distributed. He mentions that there are large investors in the protocol. I agree they should be heard. My concerns are mainly around one party having all the governance power and pushing things through that maybe the overall community doesn't agree with, but also having a small amount of the sub token, the voting kind of sub token, sway that outcome so easily is maybe a little bit of a concern. And so the vault suggested an opt-out standard. I know Coder Dan had mentioned you had a good suggestion also to implement a standard through the smart contract where you could actually, I guess, identify the voters. I think that's what you were saying.
Not what do you mean exactly?
You were suggesting a few simple lines of code that they could add to their smart contract that would identify, I guess, the VL. I could be wrong on this, but identify the VLT that was being used to vote and just take that voting power into account.
I think if we zoom out a little bit, this issue is not related to the vault at all. It's related to proxy voting and allowing you. I mean, you mentioned earlier, like how much of the voting power should a block have, and I think the answer to that is however much they should have,
Yeah.
based on the rules of the protocol. Like if you can't just say, oh, you have too much voting power, sorry, we're gonna lower your voting power. That's basically what quadratic voting is. And I've seen cases for and against that, but I think it's very easy for someone to just create like 20,000 wallets and put one ghost in them and have basically Sybil attack the protocol. That would be one way. But what you're referring to is quadratic voting, where like guys with a lot of voting power would have less than they actually do, and those that have less voting power would have more influence. We've never really even considered moving to quadratic voting. There's been a couple studies done on it, but it doesn't really seem to be something we've latched onto because of the Sybil attack vector. But it's the focus is on the vault so much just because they have amassed a lot of voting power. But I think we should remember the difference between the vault and like a guild is that the vault is just an amalgamation of the community's voting power. It's not like we have this one entity that has come in and market bought a bunch of Aavegotchis and Ghost and is trying to take over the protocol. It's made up of community members that are just, they have their assets deposited in the vault. There is a, like, the VLT token could be one attack vector, and we should look at that carefully to look at the liquidity and the basically the cost of doing a 51% attack on the protocol. I think there was some mention of that in Mikey J's original proposal, but I know the liquidity of VLT is like, it's terrible. There's not a lot of it out there. You'd have to get it OTC from some of the bigger holders, and I don't know if they would. They might sell it to you. I don't know. Probably not. But it seems like it'd be difficult to get a ton of VLT from the open market. If anyone has the pool for where you could buy VLT, that'd be great. So I don't think there's a lot of VLT out there. So it's more of just what you guys have mentioned. Like, there's a little bit of VLT can swing the vote quite a bit, and but again, this is not a vault issue. This is an issue of governance, on-chain voting in general.
I look at it
the
as
solution is,
I look at it as like a governance architecture. It's just like the architecture of how we're going about governance in a Aavegotchi DAO, and in relation to other voting mechanisms like VLT, for example. I think it's gonna be the first of many. That's kind of like the interesting part of our ecosystem. It's really cool to see like another token representing this community, and that's deciding how they're voting. It's interesting. I think we just have to make sure that, like you said, there's no vectors for attack, where if there was another party to come in that did the same thing but with a malicious intent, like that wouldn't be very good,
yeah. And the issue is, the solution is definitely trying to have more players competing against the vault to do this. Not just like, I'm surprised that no one has gone out and tried to make their own vault. I don't know how profitable it is to do it. It's I've heard Bearded say he doesn't really make a lot of money from it. I don't know. I haven't really asked or looked into it, but it might be. There's the more people we have trying to do it and trying to out compete each other, the more competition there'll be in the market, which would be smaller overall aggregated voting power, which would be a little bit more anti-fragile.
Yeah, I believe.
But no one's trying to do that yet. So there's been a lot of talk about, we should, if the vault is like killing the decentralization of the protocol, but no one is doing the work to actually create something that will help fix it or compete against it to get an equivalent amount of voting power.
I believe the vault's code is all open source too, with what they're doing.
Yeah.
So anybody could fork the vault and create their own version and have their own representative of voting power under their organization. Like, it would be cool to have.
And they could also not have a VLT token. They could just say, "Hey, F you guys, we're gonna just whatever our asset holders vote to do, that's what we're gonna do." I think the vault was very generous and should be lauded for having the VLT token as their main way of determining voting power, because they didn't have to do that. They could have just said, "You know what, guys, you're delegating to us, and we're going to act as your representatives, and we're going to vote however we think is best." But they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do the VLT. They could have just gone full representative delegate mode. So it's we're focusing on VLT because they have it, but we also should remember that they don't have to have it.
This is true. It's another layer of input that they do get from the VLT token, because you have people, even if it is a small amount of people, they are voting, I guess. And it's, the alternative would be nobody gets to decide from below, and they just decide. That is a more centralized approach. They chose not to go that route.
Someone's got their hand raised. I don't know if you can bring them up or not.
Oh, Okay.
I'm not saying it would be amazing if someone were able to get 51%, but what I'm saying is we have rules that are laid out as a community, and if someone, like, we need to think. Right now it's okay, but eventually we're going to need to think about the cost of a 51% attack. And with the having a token like the VLT is great because it allows people to cast their votes and do the internal accounting, but it is a potential attack vector. Maybe it should be a non-transferable token, right? That would be potentially one way. Like, you can't sell it to someone, because if you can sell it, then you can transfer it to someone else. Then there does become an issue of a 51% attack where you could just go and buy a bunch of VLT.
That's interesting. If there was some way to create some resistance for the token to, so it can be aggregated quickly by one party. And I guess, having no liquidity for it in a way is kind of like that. But, having some other way to make sure, like a non transferable ability, something similar like that, where you can't, it's really hard to aggregate the token into one voting block from one address specifically. And so,
I have a couple of points.
oh yeah, welcome up, Tommy Gotchi.
Hey, thanks, guys. One thing, the Vault did airdrop VLT tokens to Gotchi owners. It's one of the first things that they did, which I thought was pretty cool. My second point is that I had assets in the Vault for a long time, and I collected a bunch of VLT tokens. And then currently I have no assets in the Vault, but yet I still have the voting power because I still own the VLT token. So my thing about the voting power and how it's distributed, it should be basically recalculated whenever there's a vote, basically a snapshot. And I think that snapshot needs to be based on Aavegotchi assets that do provide voting power, and it needs to be captured at the time of the vote. The problem I see with kind of the derivative voting system, that the voting power is there as an influence of the overall voting power of the Vault, for instance, but those Aavegotchi votable or voting power assets are not necessarily accounted for at the time of the vote. That's my 2 cents.
So basically, you're saying they could, if they didn't have VLT, they could just basically assign you some sort of internal voting power based on the assets that you have in the Gotchi Vault.
Yeah.
And then do the voting that way.
Yes, because the way I think about the DAO and voting power is that it's at the time of the vote. And so from the DAO perspective, I think there should be voting power calculated at the time of the vote and not any kind of retro voting power used to influence the overall vote. Because if there's a vote, there's only so much voting power. And I'd like to have a system in place that accounts the individual. And so that individual has that influence at the time of vote. Does that make sense? Opposed to delegating in the past and then voting assets moved around, and then the voting assets being moved is not accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, would it be double voting if you voted on a proposal with your VLT through the Vault, and then also with your assets that were withdrawn, voted on the
Yeah, that was the conversation that we were having in text, and it's not an issue if I'm a minority owner. It becomes an issue with the more VLT token percentage that I own. So, and it gets to that 51% attack that we were talking about. So as the voting power of the Vault increases, let's just think about it in the future, then the people that had a lot of assets in the Vault in the past that collected a lot of VLT would have a disproportionate influence over the voting power of the Vault as time moves forward. There's only so many VLT tokens, and it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting because from the DAO voting perspective, I think we need to consider a snapshot at the time of the vote of all Aavegotchi assets, who owns them, and then they have their influence. Is the big kind of takeaway.
But what we're getting into here is something I think that it kind of loses the focus of the main issue, which is, as a protocol, we shouldn't care how another protocol, the Gotchi Vault in this case, is handling their internal voting power. Whoever, they have all the assets, so it's not really Aavegotchi's duty to manage. Yeah, they do. I mean, the Gotchi Vault has the amount of ghosts and Aavegotchis that they say that they're actually getting less because there's been like a limitation with the subgraph where they can't actually get all the voting power that they should be getting. So they have the assets.
I see what you're
because the community members have given them the assets. We should be treating them just like another large asset owner. We should not be thinking of them as any special entity. The only reason we're focusing on them as the Gotchi Vault is because they're using our assets. But like I think Yannick said above, they're just another guild, and for the voting, for like in regards to how we treat them as a voting block, they should just be treated as another guild if we're going to be fair and unbiased towards these type of projects. So that's why I think we shouldn't be like honing in and specifically looking at how did they set up their tokenomics with the VLT. It doesn't matter, because we're not going to go and tell the Gotchi Vault to change how they've done that, because that's not really our business. We're a decentralized protocol. They're something built on top of our decentralized protocol. You don't see Aave going and telling people that are building like sub DAOs on Aave that have a lot of voting power with Aave, hey guys, you shouldn't be doing your voting power this way. That's just not how things are done.
Well, I see your point that all voting power is captured, and if it would be funny, I do see your point. It would be funny if I went to the vault. Let's say I had 10 times more VLT than I had, and I went to the vault and I said, "Hey guys, I have a disproportionate influence over your voting power. I think that's a mistake. I have too much power." I'm not sure that anyone in that situation would actually go to the vault and say, "Hey, please demote me." You know what I mean? But I do see your point from the DAO, from the greater perspective of the DAO and the voting power and how it's distributed. Okay,
yeah, we shouldn't have double standards for guilds. And if like we either say, basically, as I framed it in this thread, we should frame this as, do we as a protocol want to allow delegated voting, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, are there any? Well, that'd be pretty much where we are right now. If the answer is no, what kind of limitations are there? For example, we could say, well, no smart contracts can vote on Aavegotchi, but then you have like Gnosis safe guys are screwed over. So then we say, all right, well, let's allow Gnosis safe, but then someone figures out a way to like build something based on a Gnosis safe, so then the vault or some other competitor could say, all right, well, we'll just make something based on Gnosis safe, and we'll store all the assets in Gnosis safe, but we'll read the voting power from there, and everything will be using Gnosis safe, so we'll still have our voting power. So it's very hard to say we're going to block all sorts of delegation, because if you look at pretty much every DAO out there, there's a ton of DAOs that have delegation. This is not anything that we've like recently stumbled upon or invented.
Right, and some in the chat, let me just clarify, I do not have disproportionate voting power. I was just speaking hypothetical. But and it does make sense. Yes, full proponent of decentralization and not telling people what to do and all the yumminess of blockchain technology. Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
I guess some of the questions I have, if we're gonna do, it seems like we are all kind of in favor of allowing, delegation of votes. I could see, guilds, other organizations, then should be pooling their voting power, amongst their members and voting in one block. I mean, if there's nothing wrong with that, and there really isn't, then it really could be something that a lot of people, a lot of groups in our ecosystem could use, to unify their vote if they stand a specific way on some of these issues, like the sig props. I mean, um, you
Yeah.
know, that could
Well,
be.
question.
And like we've confirmed, so the Gotchi Vault, for getting the XP, you do have to vote on the proposal, but you don't have to vote with your whole voting power because it's not in your possession. But if you vote with like one ghost worth of voting power, you'll get the XP. So that same technique could be applied to delegated voting, where you still have to vote and you got to show up and contribute your one ghost worth of voting power, but the block that you've delegated to is also going to be voting for you,
Well,
which could get
question.
that might actually get a little bit more complicated because technically, if you've delegated all your voting power, you're not going to have any voting power left to vote with because it's all been delegated. So that's actually a little bit harder to handle on the snapshot side.
That was kind of what I was going to get at. I think the significance of saying yes, we allow delegation, is that we would have to provide delegation mechanisms, and I don't think we want to do that. I don't think we want to like write code to allow a Gotchi owner to say, "Hey, I want this other address to represent my voting power," because currently there isn't anything like that. Currently, it's, hey, these guys, either a custodial service like the vault that handles all the voting power however they want to, or there's a guild that kind of gets together and says, all right, hey, everybody, we're going to vote like this. And then individuals show up and vote how their guild is going to vote. Is my distinction clear?
Yeah, basically, if we can implement it, so Mycelium's referring to MakerDAO, and I think they have on-chain delegation, just like Aave does. If so, we could probably whip up some sort of contract where you could delegate your voting power. Like you wouldn't, you could delegate. Yeah, it's a little bit complex because thing with Maker is they only have one asset. We have a ton of assets, so the voting power is constantly changing, which makes it difficult to do on-chain governance and on-chain voting power because we have, say that you delegate your NFT voting power, like your Gotchi's voting power to someone, and then you transfer that Gotchi somewhere else. So we have to not only now update the voting power, or we have to update the ownership of the Gotchi, and now we have to also update the delegated voting power of that Gotchi. That's how it typically would be done with something called checkpointing. There might be that we are looking into another way that might be able to do that better, but that's how it probably would be done. So it just adds more gas cost to every transfer and every asset we create. Every time you transfer like your Gotchi or a wearable, we have to go and update delegated voting power. So it's just another transfer. It just adds a little bit more gas cost to everyone.
What about sub-DAOs? And maybe putting in a delegation mechanism for sub-DAOs in the Gotchiverse. And, punting on the Aavegotchi DAO voting.
Yeah, but that hasn't really solved anything, right?
Right. I was just thinking there. One other governance voting mechanism pattern is that when a vote is created, voting tokens are minted, and people can go grab their voting tokens and then just transfer them to whoever they want to vote for them. It's
Actually,
kind of
that is something I'm kind of wondering is, if we are going to move forward with a delegation, I think it's going to be something useful for all the organizations are going to find that useful, because I'm thinking there's probably a certain percentage of Ghost that goes unvoted, within, within the Portal Mages, within Wagme Warriors, within, GMI. I'm sure there's members that have Ghost that have voting power, and it goes unused. It doesn't get mobilized. And if we do have this ability to delegate, you will have, the Portal Mages collectively will have a loud voice. They're representing all their members' voting power. If they choose to go that route. And I'm just throwing out an example. I have no idea who's doing this, but one guild could have more of a unified voice, and then some individual members' voting power wouldn't go overlooked. So I do see the upside to having delegation. But there's two ways, the delegation could be handled within these organizations. The first way is the VLT token, which it does actually allow some decentralization in terms of governance within the organization. But you do have the risk that if the members within the guild are inactive, which was the initial thing I mentioned, if those members are inactive with their ghost voting power, they'll most likely be inactive with the voting token. And then what can happen is there can be a smaller amount of token holders within that guild or organization that can sway the vote, which is, you could consider that a downside. But also remember, the upside is that the vote is actually more decentralized than, the alternative, which would be everybody delegates to, the representative or the head voting for the guild, and that would be the person or the group, in the guild that would be making the decisions. So that is a little bit more centralized in the sense of, maybe there are some members within the guild that might not be heard. Maybe their position might not be taken into account. So those are the two sides of it, but both kind of have their trade-offs and their upsides. But we gotta, I guess the Vault has already implemented a token, but if there's gonna be these voting tokens, should we be the ones having some sort of framework or standard on how these tokens should be implemented, distributed, all these things, or is it left to the guilds? But then, that, I guess that when I look at it, it's almost like a problem within the organization. They have to deal with it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I totally agree. We should not be telling other guilds or projects how they need to implement voting for Aavegotchi. That seems absurd to have to be telling others that hold Aavegotchi voting power to tell them how they need to decentralize their own voting power.
I agree with that, definitely.
And so essentially that's what VLT is, if we're going to use that as an example. It's a situation where they had to choose between centralizing the voting power amongst the custodians of the vault and having the custodians make all the decision, or I guess make this effort to create this VLT token to allow some sub-governance within their organization, and hopefully have a more informed vote when they go move on their votes. That's kind of what the VLT token, that was the intent of it. And so the alternative would be, like I said, a guild, any guild delegating all their voting power to one voting member who would be making the decisions within a group, or, they would have their ways of making the decision, but one person would be voting on behalf of the guild with one vote, right? So it's like, what's better? I don't know what's better. Like, on one end you have someone trying to make an effort to decentralize their governance within their little organization. On the other end, you have maybe voters who are already apathetic, who are not voting on anything, but they're still being represented. I'm looking at Mike Callum's point there, who's saying the earnest is on the non-engaging group members to decide if they want to be more engaged or leave to find better representation. I agree. And I also remember we award XP for people who are voting on these proposals. So I guess another question would be, is if you've delegated your voting power to the guild or the organization should you be awarded XP, because as an individual now you've now abdicated your responsibility for governance to someone else, and so you're no longer you can be passive in every sense in governance. You don't even have to come to these meetings. You don't have to read the forums. You just have to hold the asset. And so what sort of reward, if any, should someone like that be receiving, I think is another question.
Do you guys want to keep talking about this for the whole meeting, or do we want to go over anything else?
I'd say we move on. I think this horse has been beaten.
I would just really caution, let's not focus on the vault specifically and what they're doing or not doing. We should think about the protocol and the system that we've set up and how we want voting to be handled on Aavegotchi. And if we should really not be telling other protocols how they should handle their own internal affairs and assets. That goes for guilds. I'm not going to go and tell Orium Guild or Portal Mage guilds like how they should be doing their stuff, or like Yannick, who's got Orden GG and a bunch of gotchis. That's their, how they handle their voting power is up to them. It's up to us as a protocol to ensure that we are decentralized enough to have, like, not make it very easy to do a 51% attack on the protocol.
Well, maybe a couple of sentences as a guideline. External organizations do whatever you want, but you can't have a certain percentage because we want to maintain decentralization. So it'd be a very simple guideline thing. That makes sense. And we just come up with that percentage, like no more than 45% of the voting power.
Yeah, but they're just going to have multiple wallets. Like, you can't enforce that.
Oh, it's true. It's true. But as a general guideline. And if we realize that we need to come up with some enforcement, we can, deal with that down the road.
I think another thing, just last thing to consider is, as a DAO, we should just make sure that voting in any way is not being misrepresented. So the assets that are truly being held, either through delegation or through individuals, is truly being represented through the votes. I think that's the one thing, if there's anything here that we should just make sure we're doing due diligence as a DAO, is just making sure that the votes are not being manipulated through some other system that's maybe misrepresenting the actual voting power. And I don't see any of that. Go ahead.
The because of current events, the biggest concern is that someone gets a majority voting power and votes themselves whatever assets are available. So if someone has enough voting power and they vote themselves to receive all the DAO treasury funds. So that's been done many times in various DAOs. So I think we need to have some kind of safeguard to make sure that the DAO's assets are not essentially voted away.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Because we think, oh, that'll never happen to us. Oh, we're too active, we're too decentralized, all that kind of stuff. But there's got to be at least some canaries in the coal mine to give some kind of indication of if we're on our way to a 51% attack, and then having the safeguards so that we can come together as a community and basically fortify the treasury.
Well, I mean, do you think there's some sort of like vigilance that needs to be done in terms of maybe a group of people who are doing this, who are just making sure that this is happening? We have task forces within Aavegotchi.
Yeah, the problem comes in where, we're going to have a few people essentially concentrating on centralized power in order to become oversight. And therefore, we're essentially creating the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking we need to think about this as we're moving forward. Of there are bad actors out there trying to steal money. And there's been, I can't remember the names of them, a few DAOs that this has actually happened. They had governance, they had voting power, it was distributed, someone collected enough voting power to vote themselves millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I think that's the biggest threat to the DAO, because that's an exit strategy, that basically gets rid of all the treasury funds and stuff. And everything else is being kind of a lower priority. Maybe we're just squabbling about stuff, which is perfect. I think if we can stay there, then that's perfect.
Yeah.
But we do need to think of worst case scenarios moving forward, especially as the Dow Treasury grows and those funds are basically a big honeypot. So having mechanisms to distribute the funds is probably a higher priority than collecting more funds for the Dow. And so, like, awarding spillover or whatever we want to talk about. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up as it's one of my concerns, is there's too much concentration of voting power and we lose control of the treasury.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I agree with your sentiment, being cautious and, yeah, exactly. Valid points. And we should definitely be mindful of that. And whether that is getting some insight from our community members or just being vigilant as a DAO, or like you said, having actual safeguards in place, those would be some of the things to consider. But as far as, delegation goes, it seems like there's a green light there for like other guilds, other organizations, who feel like maybe their members could be represented a little bit better for voting, could aggregate their voting power just like the Gotchi Vault has and vote that way. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong there with that. And then they can figure out amongst themselves how they want to represent their members among their votes. And yeah, I mean, that we can leave it at that for now. Unless, Coder Dan, Tommy Gotchi, you guys got anything to add? Otherwise, we can move on to one of the other topics. I'm cool with that.
I would just say, yeah, we need more builders. We need more people making options that are even more interesting or useful than the vault. And maybe the vault has been a great proof of concept, but we need more people to step up in the community and build even better ways of doing what the vault is doing that doesn't have the drawbacks that they have. It's always the solution is going to be more building.
I'd love to see a tool that's a dashboard for delegation, and you set up a vault with your guild, and then you just pull all your voting power in there, and you can vote through that address. But that would be kind of cool, actually, to set that up, and have
could be a simple pie chart. Could be a little pie chart, just showing the distribution of voting power.
Yeah, you could have all the vaults there. Like, I'd like to see like a dashboard for vaults, not just a vault, but have like many different vaults, representing many different guilds and many different organizations. I think that would be a natural step, moving towards district DAOs, sub DAOs. Kind of, it all ties in there. But why don't we move on to the next thing then? If everybody's good there, we have a couple things.
I can't stay that much longer today, okay. But I do want to have I have a question for yesterday's topic. I believe the outcome was quite skewed towards having the 1 bar limit plus land, but do we want to go the full SIGPROP route for that, or should we revert back to what it was before doing that? I mean, we made the change, and we've pretty much seen what the outcomes have been, and the community seems to have a feeling for what they would like to do next. But if we don't really want to do that unilaterally, do a SIGPROP and corp out, that'll be 10 to 14 days for that.
People are saying revert and then SIGPROP.
it's super easy to revert it. It's definitely going to take longer to add in the land parcel check, but not much longer. But it will take a little bit more testing.
And so what we would be reverting to would be one gotchi, one whitelist?
Just unlimited.
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 Okay. So revert and then sigprop to vote on it. Yeah, I guess the vote.
Does anyone want to step up to make that sig prop?
Anybody want to make it? I mean, I could make it, but you know, better one of y'all make it. Get some XP for it. Here comes the hard part.
Yeah, the guild whitelist limit will stay in place. That's a totally non-controversial issue. Seeing the real Slim Marty. Anyone want to help build a Mafia vault? Come over and let's get to work. There you go, man. The contracts are there, open source. You can fork it, and I don't know, is the UI for it open source? I think that is too, right?
Yeah, the whole damn
gotta
thing.
Gotta get a couple builders and some coffee, and you guys can have your own vault.
There's plenty of builders in this space that are more than happy to help you out. That are also Solidity devs. I know Ernani's one of them. John Gotchi's another one. So they're around. You just gotta ask them if you're ever stuck on something. But they're very helpful.
Yeah, this is the fun of being in this space and having a permissionless protocol with everything open source. Eventually, you can just keep iterating until you find a good solution to something. But I do think that it's not the vault's issue. It's just this is going to happen in any kind of governance protocol where there's an incentive for voting power to get collected together and aggregated.
I think the solution.
They're the ones that did it first.
I think maybe the solution here to to move past this is instead of looking at the vault, let's create our own vaults. Like, let's make more vaults and let's be competition for the vault. And offer things that maybe the vault doesn't even offer right now. So there's so many different incentives that can be built in, because at the end of the day, when you're offering delegation as a service to your guildies, to your members, it's a service. You can, it could be revenue generating if you set it up correctly. So I could see it working out for guilds, to have this as a way to make some money. Have members delegate, maybe there's a monthly fee, maybe there's a membership. I don't know. But you could have things like that set up, and that maybe that is the solution,
I'd like to see non-custodial vaults. It's kind of doesn't make sense, but it would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you can vote with a Gnosis on Snapshot, can't you? As long as you have all your members signing off on it.
Yeah, I believe so.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what the upper limit is of having the voting breakdown. You need 300 of 1,000. The coordination would be pretty brutal, depending on how large the organization is.
I will say we did open a Haunt One portal together through a Gnosis safe. It was clunky, but we made it happen. So it might be possible. But it could be as simple as that. You pool amongst your members in the Gnosis, and then you can deploy your vote that way as a group. Talk about it as a group, deploy it as a group. Could be one way to handle that.
Just if you are going to roll your own vault, just make sure that the events and everything are generally the same as the vault, or it's non-custodial, because otherwise we will have issues with voting power. If we have to go through and add exceptions for each vault that's created out there, the XP script is going to get pretty ridiculous. So let's try to keep things tidy. We're not gonna do like custom solutions for everyone. It's gonna take a lot of dev bandwidth to do that. I see no futuristic asking about funding. I honestly don't remember. That's something you probably need to ask the DTF. I don't think Pixelcraft gave them a grant, but they might have. They might have. I'm not sure. It's been a long time. You should probably ask Bearded. I don't do the record keeping for that. That's Golden Cross, so he's not online right now. But yeah, funding. I mean, they were the first, the first major protocol built on Aavegotchi. So probably likely they got some funding, but I honestly don't remember.
Yeah. Okay, so whitelist thing is going to be reverted. It's going to get turned into SIGPROP. We'll vote on it, and then we'll move forward. I guess we can use the. Do we know who's making this? If not, we can use the same. We can use the same three options that you provided, and then just do a general background kind of write up. I don't mind. I don't mind doing it, but I'd rather have someone else, put that together if there is someone stepping up for that. But otherwise, I don't mind doing it either. So can do that. Wagme was gonna do the friends and LPS. Phantasma's doing the elders. Yeah. Okay. Okay, here, let's look at the Miro board here. So Sunset Friends, update glitter LPs. We talked about that last week. Dust Alchemica. We can probably talk about Dust Alchemica for next week, or is that something?
I have a little bit of time if we want to go over it. That's probably the last thing I can go over tonight.
Hey, GM.
Hey, Phantasma.
Mark asked me to kind of help talk about Dust Alchemica, if that's the topic that you guys mostly want to cover.
Thank you for coming up.
No problem. So yeah, definitely not my idea, but I was reading over it, and I think we could talk on a broad sense as do people like the idea of having a second type of Alchemica that is used to craft stuff before it can be real Alchemica, that it can be sold on the market. I think that's generally the idea, and it's pretty interesting in how it could help us turn spillover back on and give usage for lands, for extra lands that people have extra unexploited right now.
I had a comment to Mark's post. I really like the idea of a new installation being able to turn on spillover, have spillover be the Dia Chimica, and the new installation is used kind of as a refinery to refine Dia Chimica to a Chimica. The questions I have, technical questions, are: would the Dia Chimica need to be an ERC20? So would it need to be on-chain, or could it be a Gotchiverse asset?
Yeah, it would need to be an on-chain asset, ERC20. Because when you purchase an installation or upgrade an installation, it's happening on-chain. So we would need to deduct the balance, which would need to be an ERC20.
Okay. Then it seems like kind of to Phantasma, am I saying your name wrong? His point is, generally speaking, I like the idea, and I'd like to hear what the community has to say as well before we kind of move on into detail.
Yeah, so my understanding of it, scroll up to Mark's post here, is that so the spillover would be Alchemica dust. The dust would be it would be the normal spillover in the game. You'd pick it up and then you would exit it to your on-chain wallet, and it would be like a D Alchemica token. So those would be 4 new ERC20 tokens that do not have the ability to be transferred, except I guess they'd be burned. No, they would be transferred when you installed something or purchased an upgrade. They would at that point be converted, I guess, into real ERC, like ERC20 Alchemica, and they would be sent to Great Portal, Pixelcraft, and the DAO, I guess. And then all you can craft with it is the converter. And the converter is something you put on a parcel, and it converts the D Alchemica that was spent to buy it into real Alchemica. So I do have a question. So when the converter is purchased, is that Alchemica being created, like turned into real Alchemica, or is it just get burned? The D Alchemica gets burned, and then the real Alchemica is yielded from the converter.
Well, I think we lost Phantasma. He's back. He's raising his hand.
Okay. Hefe, are you able to bring him up?
Yeah, let me do that. Let me try that feature out here. Oh, yeah, we got him up. I think No Future is able to get him up as well, so thanks. Yeah.
Hey, so as I'm understanding it, you know, you collect the dust, so then you have to invest it into an existing parcel, and that parcel is the one. So you know, you're not generating any new Alchemica. You're basically following the formula of the installation that Mark proposed, so that you basically get a 100% return. You know, you're gonna put in 200 dust Alchemica to over time throughout the course of the installation. You're gonna get 200 real Alchemica, and then you know there's percentages allocated to the owner of the parcel. So basically the benefit to the owner of the parcel is to have somebody else come in and put installations, and you're going to share the profits of the real Alchemica being extracted.
Is the converter it's an installation that you would craft, right?
Yeah. So the scholars, let's say, we actually don't like that term, but the renters would be, you know, need to spend this. Basically, this is the only thing they would be able to spend it on, if I understand correctly, to craft this installation. Then they would have to find a parcel that I guess has the access rights open for anybody to come and build. Then they come and build this installation, and over time, you know, it's going to basically extract 400, you know, let's say 400 FUD, and give 200 to the renter, and 200 you know, the other amounts. I don't have the amounts right in front of me right now. I'm trying to pull them up, but the other amounts go via spillover and also to the owner. So the idea is to kind of create a win-win where you know, extraction isn't happening right away. You're basically creating a time sink and forcing them to reinvest their collection into empty unused parcels, pretty much.
So one of my questions, you're saying like you would place this on anyone's parcel that has like building installations enabled, and then somehow the yield that comes from the converter would get sent back to the converter owner, but that's not really how the ERC 1155 work. Because say you have a parcel that's like, it's a spacious parcel, and there's like 100 converters on the parcel. We have to keep track of all those owners of each of those converters, right? And like that could be a little bit more complicated. Also, it's just kind of a mess. Couldn't we say you can only place it on, like, if you whoever parcel you place it on, that's who gets it, and then just encourage these players to go and buy a humble? They're not
That
that
was
expensive.
Yeah, that was kind of my take on it. Was after reading comments and stuff like that, my idea was, or my take on it was, hey, there's a new installation, essentially a refinery. It refines diachemica to alchemica. Anybody can buy it and put it on their parcel, and then as spillover is collected, the caretaker, or the, not formerly known as scholar, would come deposit the diachemica in this installation in a batch, and then come back after how much time, and then they get alchemica minus the fee. And the fee goes to the parcel owner because they paid for the refinery, they equipped the refinery, and so they get compensated. And so it would be kind of an investment to a parcel owner, hoping that spillover collectors would come over and use their installation. Now, ultimately, we want collectors to buy a humble, set up their own refinery, so they get 100%, and they only have to wait for the diachemica to be refined into alchemica.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully they upgrade up and up. So that was kind of the overall idea that I thought it would fit into our existing paradigm. Hey, you're a farmer, you need insulation, you're doing this, and you get alchemica on, pops out.
This could be.
I think that makes a good entry point for humbles.
This could
also currently doesn't really exist.
This could also be interesting if it's used in conjunction with the hot zone being turned back on, because if you have this hot zone spillover, like, I know I never get to collect all of it. Usually, 25 to 50%. There's a whole bunch of gotchis that show up right around the spillover. I don't even know how they can tell. I'm sure there's a way that they can see, that this parcel just channeled. They show up, they start picking a bunch of it up. Great, now I have a bunch of gotchis in my premises, and I also happen to have one of these refineries on my parcel. Right after they pick it up, they can go over to my refinery, refine it, and they'll get their cut of whatever they picked up in that area.
And also another idea is that spillover is all treated the same. So if you channel, you get your stemming, and then there's a hot zone spillover, you run over there and you're grabbing diachemica. So the chances are you would want a refinery as well if you want to convert it to alchemica.
Oh, true. Yeah.
For whatever reason. Or
true.
Diachemica, you just use that straight away. You don't have to wait, and you're just farming. You're just upgrading and all that kind of stuff. So I think for the parcel owner who's building up their farm and all that kind of stuff, being able to use diachemica is great. Who cares? You run around, you collect your spillover, you're going to reinvest it anyway. So you might not even need a refinery. And so for the existing farming scenario, who cares about a refinery? And really, it's specific to a game mechanic of onboarding spillover collectors.
I guess the incentive of still having the refinery, though, even if you're building, would be the scholars around you, or the collectors around you who did collect the diachemica you didn't get. They would more than likely just go over to your refinery to refine the alchemica, and you would get your portion of that as well, right, from them.
Yes, yeah, it would be an investment. But if you're not concerned about spillover, it won't really affect you as a farmer. So I like the idea. It doesn't introduce more friction to our existing farmers, but it also allows collectors to show up, collect, and have a path moving forward to upgrade themselves.
Yeah, I do agree with kind of Michael F's sentiment that, a large amount of the scholars and these collectors that are around picking this up, a lot of them, they might be working towards a humble, to getting one, but I don't think many of them would be able to buy that, straight up.
They'd probably use their guild refinery. So If you have a
True.
guild that's onboarding a lot of collectors, they'd be like, hey, make sure you go to D12 or whatever, this thing, when you refine your Alchemica, so that you're giving back to the guild. And so the guild could make a little percentage on the borrowing split, the renting split, and if they're giving away 100%, which is interesting, but then they could also make a little bit of split on the refinery. And we would have to talk through the properties of the refinery, how much time, how big's the bag size, all that kind of stuff. Can you upgrade it to increase the bag size? Can you use glitter to minimum, we have to work through all that stuff. But I think generally for this conversation, it's, do we like the idea of the refinery, the converter, as Mark put?
Yeah, the refinery is something that has been, it's been implemented in other games like this, where the Alchemica would actually be considered the raw resource, and you'd have a number of things it could be refined into, or you'd have to refine it into a base element and then use that for building. So it is a concept that I think other games have used as well.
So if a borrowed gachi goes and empties their refiner and it's not on their parcel, so say they pick up the Alchemica, they convert it into a refiner, and they put it on, I guess, someone else's parcel, but whoever empties the refiner is who would get that yield?
Yeah, it's a very good question.
And then it would go to, if it's a borrowed gachi, it would go into the gachi pocket, and then it would be split with, the typical 3-way, 2-way split, however.
Yeah, from reading, the term soulbound was thrown around, but I would think that it would be the wallet would get the Alchemica whenever the refinery finishes processing. I'm not sure if that's kind of a weird.
Yeah, but if it's an Aavegotchi that's being borrowed, we don't typically send Alchemica directly to the owner. We send it to the gachi pocket for borrowed gachis.
Yeah, very good question. You have any suggestions?
Yeah, I would say, it would go probably to the gachi pocket, and then I think if we can have a fairly cheap pathway where an Aavegotchi, like a new learner, could come in and they could find it fairly attractive to actually purchase their own humble and be able to set up a bunch of refineries everywhere. That would be a pretty cool way to potentially onboard people without just being purely extractive. But I guess what we're always also talking about is, okay, what if they don't have the land? They're going to just go on they'll get the Alchemica, they'll go on someone else's land and place it. And when that yield is ready, it's going to be kind of a free for all. Whoever gets to that refiner first would get it.
Question: Could it be possible, so you have a learner, that has a gachi, 1155, and they collect that Alchemica, they put it in the refinery, they have to wait 3 days, 2 days, whatever it is, and then they come back. They might have a different gachi. They might have gachi 1099. Then could they collect their batch? Because you know the wallet owner, or the wallet address, but it's a different gachi. But could they collect their batch, and could it go into their new gachi pocket?
So I have something to answer that. The person who was renting out the gachi to the guy who was originally playing kind of gets screwed, because then he doesn't get a split. Unless there's some sort of split that happens once, when the amount gets entered into the, what's it called, the harvester,
Converter or refiner,
yeah,
whatever.
But essentially isn't all that this is doing is just a split of a split? Is that all we're doing with this idea? It just adds an extra split onto whatever. I don't see how this really changes much other than just a second split in terms of Alch being picked up.
Yeah, I think the split comes in consideration when the Alchemica is ready to be, taken out.
But I'm just saying, like, this,
very
in
good
terms
point.
of spillover, this doesn't actually change anything. It's just an extra fraction that gets, like, instead of whatever original, like, how the spillover works normally, it spills over, you get 50%, the scholar gets 50%. Now, instead of that, you're just giving them 50% of the 50%. Like, it doesn't feel like this is changing anything. It's just going to adjust. Rentals are just going to adjust accordingly. It's not going to, like, this is just.
I agree. Yes, it doesn't change kind of the flow of the Alchemica. I think the question is how to keep track of who gets what when you have a rented gotchi, because there's a time delay of the Alchemica becoming Alchemica.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I get that that's another issue, but I'm just saying, like, the core of the solution doesn't really change anything in terms of we're still giving scholars Alchemica directly. It just takes a bit longer. Yeah, like Dan said, it basically just introduces a delay.
I think
Yeah, and
another thing to consider.
it's the fee and the delay.
Yeah, another thing to consider here is, you know, I don't know if in any way this addresses the botting side of it. Like, so this would be used in conjunction with something else, maybe, if we were to do this, but I don't think it directly has any impact on reducing botting or preventing. I mean, what's your guys' take on it? Do you think it has any effect at all?
I think the cartridges is supposed to address the botting. I think we want to address spillover and upgrading learners.
I mean, I guess that this whole concept is kind of cool because it adds an extra sync to Alchemica for whoever builds the converter. But besides that, I feel like the converter just kind of like delays extraction. Like, it doesn't really do much.
Yeah, it's trying to influence people or influence learners to buy assets.
I don't think, like, first of all, like, there's not even room on a humble for one of these things. Like, humbles are small. You could already only get like one of each reservoir and harvester and an altar. Like, you can't put anything else on there. So like it like people scholars would just be using someone else's converter. Like, I doubt they would be using, like, I doubt they would buy a humble and put this on there and then upgrade it.
Well,
Just
that's
like,
we would have to design it so it does that. It would have to be designed in a way that they would have to get a humble. Because if I totally agree, if you let them just use the land of someone else, then we're just back to where we were before, and we're just like kicking the can 3 months down the line for whatever yield they're trying to get.
yeah, but the question is, how do they get to that first humble? Like, it would be like they couldn't.
Well, some of them could. They're not all the learners that were coming are like completely poor and can't afford a humble. There's like a subgroup that could afford it if they thought it was a good investment.
Yeah, so then it's, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
This comes back to my original argument, like, or not argument, but it's like discussion point, which was not every play to earn game is perfect for every play to earn player, or not every NFT game is perfect for everyone. We should like know what kind of players we would want to attract into our ecosystem, and if they can't afford a humble, it's just go play Sunflowers, where there's like no upfront cost whatsoever. But in this, maybe
we also do have the issue that a humble isn't even big enough. Like, they would have to choose between putting this on a humble or putting something else. Like, it's not like they have tons of options.
Well, it's not. You could put, like, if these were 2x2s, you could put how many is that? Like, is it 30? No, not 32. How many is that? I hate doing math on live calls, but
4.
It's like what?
I think you'll get 4 harvesters on a humble, or is it 8?
It's 4. Pretty sure.
Yeah, 4. But this is kind of the scenario I have in my head is that, let's say, for instance,
Wait. You don't need an altar. You probably wouldn't need an altar for this, or maybe you would, but maybe you need like a level 1 altar. But I think they could still get like a decent amount of ROI with that, and they could just hold that and keep doing it.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking, is like, let's say they're able to get a humble, put a converter on there, and then they're just running around collecting, and then they convert, and then they upgrade their altar, and then they're channeling, and they're making more because they have that altar available to them, and they just keep upgrading. It seems like it's a path of upgrading. It makes sense. It just kind of makes sense. Oh, you just collect and convert it, and you don't even need the converter if you're going to be reinvesting. So then you save time.
Upward mobility.
Also have to look at the time to implement this and see if this is something that we want. In reference to what Coder Dan just said, what type of player do we want to attract? Implementing the system right now with what we currently have and adding the spillover, turning it back on, it'll be good. We'll attract some players, but we have to keep in mind the type of player we'll be attracting is someone who is coming here mainly for the farming aspect, so they like to grind, and some of those players also coming for the yield because they do make some money from this, right? So that's the type of player we'll be attracting, and I'm not saying in any way that's bad. That's just the type of player that'll be attracted to this this sort of thing with turning the spillover back on, adding this another layer of complexity. That'll be good to attract those players. But if we want to attract true gamers and like the people that enjoy playing games, we need to and I think Pixelcraft is already working on this, is I think the focus to attract those types of players would have to be on the gameplay. So I agree with the sentiment of Lev, who had said in the chat here, social centers, missions and objectives to complete in a limited time. Some other maybe grinding and farming mechanics that are a little bit more competitive, could be like fishing, mini games, and maybe there's some Alchemica reward associated with those as well. And so then you're attracting the gamers, you're also attracting the farmers, you're attracting people who want to hang out in the metaverse, Web3 natives. We got NFT displays coming, so we're going to have artistic groups coming in, hopefully, in terms of like NFTs. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm kind of really excited about. And I consider this type of player that we're going to get in from the spillover as just one type of player that we're going to have amongst many different types. But we haven't put any very much focus as a DAO on those other types of players that we could potentially attract. And so
one thought.
Go ahead.
One thought, it would be interesting if we do move forward with DI Chemica, if parcel owners could list their parcels in DI Chemica. So maybe you have some extra humbles that you're not really using. You're like, oh, well, let me just set DI Chemica amounts that learners could run around, collect DI Chemica, and use spillover to directly buy a humble, for instance. And then it would be a complete vertical. Like all you have to do is rent a gotchi, run around, collect spillover, collect enough, and then you buy a humble. You got a humble, and then you can start upgrading through that.
Yeah, the potential is there. I think we don't need to come up with super specific stuff in order to say it's a good or bad idea. I think it's definitely a good idea that's come up, and in the forums we could start going back and forth with the specifics. I wanted to make one quick point before we lose Coder Dan, because I see a lot of people commenting like, well, this is not what we need. We need PvP. We need this and that stuff. So Coder Dan, my perspective being a non-coder, not running a studio, is you still have professionals that do specific stuff. So I personally assume that there's a Realm team working on combat, just as Coder Dan said. I think it doesn't have to mean that if we discuss other stuff like smart contract stuff, any other topics, it means that we're not addressing the important stuff. So Coder Dan, if you could share on your perspective so that people kind of understand, if we're doing this or that, does it really cost us progress in PvP? I think there's a confusion on that.
Yeah, and every time someone's like, don't discuss this, we need more gameplay. Like, guys, that's literally what Pixelcraft is like focused on all the time. So the DAO is here to ideate on things and discuss things that the DAO wants. And this is what people have wanted to discuss this week. There's been a lot of discussion on the DAO forum. If you want to discuss something in the DAO call, then just go to the DAO forum and write about it. don't come to the meeting and say, well, we shouldn't be discussing this, because there's only a couple things on the DAO forum right now. There's Dust Alchemica, custodial asset management, eyes and eye trait, the golden altar being removable. Okay, there's like a couple things, and that's what we're talking about. So if you want to discuss more gameplay, you should make some posts about gameplay. Be more active on the DAO forum. Don't just come to the DAO Discord meeting and start telling people not to discuss stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're talking about proxy voting all week, of course it's going to get discussed now, and then spillover. So was all the rage just maybe less than a month ago. So I think it's disingenuous to say it's not an important topic now. We're just juggling a big wide variety of topics. But if you could just no need to share any alpha, but just paint a picture of that, so that people understand that there is coders working hard on gameplay, PvP, traits. I think that's what people are concerned about here.
Oh yeah, we're like I've been doing a lot of the planning and the roadmap for the internal dev sprints that we're going to be doing soon, and we have like a couple major dev epics coming out. Epic is like a term for a sprint. So the NFT display, and then after that, the next one is combat. And there's so much associated with combat that I wish we could ship it before NFT display, but NFT display is as far as the features associated with it, it's a much lighter lift for the subgroup of the team that's working on that. There's other members of the team that are working on the combat, which takes a lot more time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it's like there's people that are like, well, why don't you just do combat first? And it's like, well, if everyone could focus on combat, but then we're not shipping any new features for like 2 to 3 months. So we want to have cycles where we're kind of iteratively shipping these new features and improving the Gotchiverse while also focusing on like big ticket items like combat. And so the DAO, whatever you guys want to discuss, just go on the DAO forum or the Canny, and those are the best places to like put your ideas, and then we can come over here and talk about them in the DAO meeting. But don't come here telling people what they should be discussing and shouldn't be discussing. That's like, by the time we're here, the process for that week has already finished.
Yeah, and if we hire the DAO project manager, that could take some weight off your shoulders of dealing with whatever the drama of this versus that person is happening that week in the DAO, so that you can actually focus more on the shipping. And we have a DAO project manager. I mean, seeing some of the interactions that are going on, I think we could use a DAO manager, project manager, to come and say, you know what, that's not exactly how it is. I'm gonna end that discussion here, and let's focus on this and that, because who needs, I mean, I think we're a small enough community to keep going at each other, factionalizing into different groups. So
Totally.
I think that if you get a paid person taking it as a paid responsibility to organize this DAO, that will take some weight off your shoulders, so that this isn't affecting you as much as you being able to focus on the right stuff where we want you to, which is what you do best.
Yeah, I mean, my effort is like I go on the DAO forums and I respond to things and I think about things. I wouldn't say like it's not a huge weight for me. So, but having the DAO project manager will be amazing, and I know there's some good applicants that have applied for it. So it'll definitely help with organizing things and bringing a little bit more order to the meetings, and just having more transparency for everyone to know what the DAO is currently thinking at any moment.
Yeah, and for the project manager, we met. There's a few of us in the DAO that met and went over the applicants, and the process is moving forward. We're going to the next step. Dr. Wagner's leading that, and so we'll know more hopefully very soon.
Yeah, right on, guys. A lot of things going on. Pixelcraft's building. As a DAO, it's we're still getting a lot of shit done, and these conversations are important. I'd like to see more gameplay discussion for sure, and that's something that maybe we can spin up a thread on. Just what are we expecting from gameplay? We can take some things from the canny. I know there have been a lot of suggestions there, and start discussing more like the our vision and expectations as a DAO of like how we want the gameplay to happen. There's already some sort of a framework through the Gotchiverse Bible, with giving us details on weapons, stats. There's plenty to work with, so I think that's going to be a good conversation to have. And we have that eye conversation too that we'll bring up next week. So we'll get into that. We'll get into some trait stuff if we happen to have those threads this week. And then we can also address the altars, moving the altars. And I was going to bring up the Sunset Friends and update glitter LPs, but I feel like we've talked about that a lot now. Is there anything that we'd like need to touch on or continue to bring up, discuss before we move on to like making this into some sort of a proposal? I don't know if Dr. Wagner's proposal became a SIG prop, but maybe that could be an actionable step to take. But we can talk about that next week as well, and just see what we're gonna do with that next. We have
What? I have a question about the new voting power, because I'm waiting to make sure that WAP Ghost and all that voting power is ready. In order, I'm going to put a SIG prop for the respecifying spirit points potion.
Oh, respect points. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. So I know we talked about that a couple weeks ago, and yeah, that'll be. I think a lot. There was good sentiment around that, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for voting power to be updated.
Yeah, good idea. And then our AGEP 38 stop new BRL swearable emissions that passed, and so we'll be moving forward with that. And then we'll look at the. I know Phantasma, you're up here. The WTF has 10 members currently, right?
Wouldn't know it off the top of my head.
Okay.
How many we are.
All right.
Speaking of the WTF,
yeah.
we do have a thread I'm gonna link about new wearable sets. So there's no new wearables, but we can always make them more attractive, more useful by creating more sets. So we've had a busy thread on that. If anybody wants to jump in and suggest their own, or also react to the ones that have been proposed so far, so that way we have an idea of which ones are shaping up to be pretty popular, so that we can put them into a prop.
I've also been discussing a very interesting idea with Bin Laden that I think we'll bring up next week and bring it to your guys' attention. But it could be another potential use case for the current wearables. So not ready to present that yet, but we'll talk about that next week for sure. That's all I got for this week. Is there anything else you got to add here, Coder Dan, or any of you other fellas up here?
I just want to say that I hope everyone can be like more respectful to each other. Stop the name calling. Stop the just like aggressive behavior to each other here in the Discord, because it's really not something anyone enjoys seeing. Like if you guys have issues, take them outside of this Discord. Go into the DMs with each other. None of us want to hear bickering between people. It's just like it's not cool to be in this Discord doing that kind of stuff. Don't call people names. Don't like insult them. Let's all be gentlemen and gentle ladies in the Discord, and just have good vibes.
Yeah, I agree with the good vibes.
I don't want to block people, but if you're gonna bring a bunch of negative energy, I'm personally just gonna block you and not gonna view what you say, because I don't want to be subjecting myself to that type of energy either. And if someone is bringing negative energy into the Discord, then we're not going to ban you unless you do something really bad. But I'm personally going to block you, and I'm sure a lot of other people will too. So treat other people like you'd like to be treated. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, if like right now, there's 94 people in the call. If you single out the people that still want to fight, still want to argue, still want an equal, it's probably less than 5. So, I think it doesn't reflect everybody. So at one point, you have to be respectful that not everybody's here for the drama or the vitriol, and we're actually here for the game, and it's had time to move on, right?
I love that we
Or
can.
take it to DM, like you say.
I love that we can still be objective as a DAO on these Sundays, and no matter how controversial anything is, it's important to look at things objectively, because that's the only thing that's the only way we're gonna move forward on a lot of these very either heated or controversial issues. You gotta just look at it, the core issue that you have, and present that objectively. I think is the best way to be heard, in the DAO. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
seems like
gonna
that
block.
been-
I'm not gonna block people without like any warning. I'm gonna try to do my best to, do my part. But if they want to keep doing that kind of behavior, unfortunately, I can't change people's personalities or their behavior. So I'm not gonna like have that energy in my Discord, in my feed every day. People block people on Twitter all the time or mute them. It's just part of life.
Yep,
Yeah, everyone just be respectful to each other.
that's right.
Yeah, there is
Don't bring your ego into this Discord. You can bring your ego into another Discord, but leave your ego outside in another tab.
Well, and also, for name calling and the animosity going on. Hey guys, you can type out whatever you want, say whatever you want, but you can also delete it before you send it. Choose delete.
Good point.
That's true, man. At my last job, somebody once gave me the advice. You know that really pissed off email you're about to send? Just save it and revisit it the next morning to see if you really wanna send it. And it was great advice that helped me, get a little bit less into trouble, because I do have a little bit of a temper, and it really helped my career to take that advice and just save it at least for 24 hours before hitting send.
Yeah, true. Type all you want, shift A delete, select all delete.
Yeah. All
Cool,
right.
friends. Well, I'm gonna head out and hope you guys have a great Sunday.
Oh yeah. Hope
Thank you very much, Coder Dan.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
Code like
sir.
a win.
And definitely everyone go post on the DAO forums, because that's where the conversation happens quickly here in the Discord. But the DAO forum is really where we want to keep things a little bit slower and a little bit more permanent. So if you really have strong opinions about things, that's where you should be posting them. There's a ton of great content on there, and just a lot of really good discussion. And that's kind of the second heart of the DAO. So that's where I go if I want to have some good discussion and read some good opinions about what's going on in the DAO.
Yeah. Right on. Thank you for your time here on Sunday. Thank you for the 90 people who came in to join us. We are growing every week. I think this might have been our all-time high for Sunday DAO participation. But thank you all for coming out, hanging out, being part of the discussion. We're moving forward as a DAO, and we got what do we got tonight? We got Gotchi Space tonight. That'll be on Twitter. And other than that, I hope you all have a good weekend and a good rest of your week. We'll reconvene next week, and we'll talk about some of our other topics.
Yep, and there's only 2 weeks left in summer, so enjoy it. Enjoy the summer while it's still warm and before we get into fall. The fall is the real shipping season. It's gonna be a lot of shipping in September. So enjoy the rest of August.
Ooh, I like that. All right.
All right, see you, friends.
Later. Peace out. See y'all.
Peace out, everybody.
Yeah, later.